The sun was dipping low, casting long golden streaks over the dusty, uneven road that led to the small village where Hope lived. Micah had been there many times before, but today something felt different, a quiet stirring in the air that tugged at his heart without explanation. As he walked past the makeshift stalls and faded houses, his eyes caught a glimpse of a little girl sitting on a cracked wooden crate, her small hands clutching a bundle of roasted sweet potatoes. Her face was bright but worn beyond her years, and wrapped delicately around her neck was a silver necklace, simple yet striking, catching the last rays of sunlight like a secret treasure. Micah's breath caught. The necklace was unmistakable. Years ago, in a different life, he had given that very necklace to a woman he cared for deeply. The memory flooded him, the gentle smile, the soft whisper of promises made, and the pain of leaving behind a love he never forgot. Now, here it was again, shining quietly in the dust, worn by a child whose eyes held the same spark of resilience he had once admired. Curiosity pulled him closer, the crunch of gravel beneath his steps breaking the silence. The girl looked up, startled for a moment, then shyly offered a small smile. "Hello," Micah said gently, his voice soft like a bridge reaching out across the years. "That's a beautiful necklace you have. May I ask, where did you get it?" Hope's gaze dropped to the ground, fingers tracing the silver chain. "My mama gave it to me," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. There was a quiet strength in her words, a mix of pride and sorrow tangled together like the worn threads of her dress. Micah knelt down to her level, searching her face for answers he didn't yet know how to ask for. The village seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them, a billionaire lost in a sea of simple poverty, and a little girl carrying a piece of his past around her neck. Hope looked up again, meeting his eyes with an honesty that broke through the walls he'd built around his heart. In that fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged not by blood or fortune, but by a silent understanding of hope and hardship intertwined. Micah knew then that this meeting was no accident. It was a beginning, the first fragile step toward uncovering truths buried deep beneath years of silence. And as the sun finally slipped below the horizon, casting shadows across the village, he felt a quiet resolve take root, to find the story behind the necklace and perhaps to reclaim a part of himself he had long lost. The following evening, under the soft glow of a flickering street lamp, Micah found himself drawn back to the small, weathered house where Hope and her mother lived. The air was thick with the scent of earth and distant rain, mingling with the faint aroma of cooking fires and whispered memories. As he approached the doorstep, a hesitant knock escaped his lips, fragile yet determined, as if the very act of reaching out held both promise and fear. The door creaked open slowly, revealing Grace, a woman whose eyes carried the weight of hardship and stories left untold. Her glance flickered briefly to the necklace that now rested against her daughter's chest, and in that moment, the past and present collided like crashing waves. Grace's voice trembled as she spoke, the warmth in her words fighting against years of silence. It was a gift, from someone very special. She paused, searching Micah's face as if weighing the right moment to unravel the fragile thread of their shared history. Hope nestled closer to her mother, clutching the necklace tightly, a silent guardian of secrets. Micah's heart clenched. He knew the necklace was not just a trinket, but a symbol of a bond neither time nor distance could erase. The room, modest and dimly lit, felt heavy with the ghosts of memories long buried. Grace's confession unfolded gently, like a fragile melody coaxed from a forgotten piano. She spoke of a past marked by love and loss, of promises made beneath star-filled skies, and the painful choices that had forced them apart. Her words painted a portrait of resilience, a mother striving to shield her child from a world that had often been unkind. Micah listened, every detail etching itself deeper into his soul. The realization that Hope was more than a chance encounter, that she was his daughter, settled over him with a bittersweet weight. The necklace, once a simple token of affection, now shone as a beacon of connection, bridging the chasm of years and silence. He reached out, fingertips trembling, and gently touched the silver chain, feeling the pulse of a story that was still unfolding. In that quiet room, beneath the hum of the evening, two worlds began to merge. Micah saw not only the struggles but also the fierce love that had kept Grace and Hope going. He felt the stirrings of responsibility and hope intertwined, promising that this time, he would not walk away. The necklace, resting lightly against Hope's heart, was no longer just a gift from the past. It was a promise for the future. Memories surged through Micah's mind like restless tides, pulling him back into the shadows of a past he had long tried to bury. Each fragment was sharp and vivid, the echo of laughter in sunlit rooms, the whispered promises exchanged in the hush of twilight, the sudden silence that followed when everything began to unravel. The past and present twisted together, indistinguishable, as if time itself refused to separate the man he once was from the man standing now before Grace and Hope. He saw her again, Grace, her eyes bright with hope and pain, the gentle curve of her smile that had once been his solace. They had shared dreams, fleeting and fragile, woven tightly between the cracks of their fractured lives. But choices, hard and unforgiving, had driven them apart, a crossroads where love was not enough to overcome the weight of circumstance. Micah's heart ached remembering the night he left, the silence that swallowed their parting words, and the promise he never fulfilled. As he stared into Hope's eyes, a reflection of Grace's strength and vulnerability, Micah felt the heavy burden of lost time. He recalled the necklace, the token of love that he had given Grace before fate forced them into separation. That silver chain had traveled through years of silence, carrying with it a message of belonging and a hope for reunion. It was a fragile lifeline, binding them across distance and pain, now resting gently against Hope's chest. The past was not a distant land but a living, breathing presence between them. It spoke in the tremble of Grace's voice, in the guarded hope within Hope's gaze, and in Micah's own trembling hands as he reached out, desperate to mend what was broken. The wounds of yesterday still lingered, but beneath them, a new possibility began to bloom, fragile yet fierce, like the first light breaking through a long, cold night. In that moment, Micah understood that the tangled threads of his past were not chains meant to bind him, but bridges waiting to be crossed. The echoes of old regrets mingled with the quiet promise of forgiveness, and the faint stir of a future that could be rewritten. He was no longer a man running from shadows, but a father ready to face the light, however uncertain, however daunting the path ahead might be. The first soft rays of dawn filtered through the cracked window panes of the small apartment where Hope and Grace lived, casting a pale golden light that seemed to breathe a fragile warmth into the cold, worn space. That morning, as the city around them stirred awake with its usual cacophony of life, Micah stood quietly outside the door, a bundle of carefully wrapped groceries in his arms and a heart heavy with unspoken words. The weight of the past pressed gently against his chest, yet beneath it all was a growing resolve, a promise silently made to himself and to the family he had only just begun to know. When Grace opened the door, surprise flickered in her eyes before softening into something warmer, tentative but hopeful. Micah offered a small, humble smile, extending the bags filled with fresh bread, fruits, and vegetables, simple tokens of care, yet imbued with all the compassion he could muster. "I thought you might need these," he said softly, the words carrying more meaning than mere generosity. "For you and Hope." His voice trembled slightly, raw from years of silence and regret, yet steady with the strength of his intention. Grace's eyes brimmed with tears, not from shame, but from the fragile relief of being seen, acknowledged, and offered kindness without condition. Hope shyly peeked from behind her mother's skirt, clutching the necklace Micah had given her, a symbol now glowing brighter with the warmth of renewed connection. The silence between them was filled with unspoken gratitude, a delicate bridge slowly being built from past pain toward future hope. Micah lingered, feeling the invisible walls begin to crumble, the weight of years lifting ever so slightly. He spoke then, his voice a gentle thread weaving through the quiet room. "I want to be here, for you both, to help, whatever you need." The words hung in the air, fragile yet unwavering, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of lost time. Grace nodded, the lines of exhaustion softening as a tentative smile touched her lips. She reached out and took his hand, a simple gesture heavy with meaning, an unspoken agreement to walk forward together, however uncertain the road. Hope's small hand soon joined theirs, the three fingers entwined like roots holding fast in the soil of newfound family. Outside, the city roared on, indifferent to the quiet miracle unfolding within those four walls. Yet inside, a seed had been planted, nurtured by humility, courage, and an unyielding hope that even the deepest scars could heal. Micah knew the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but in this moment, surrounded by the soft glow of morning light and the fragile warmth of human connection, he found a peace that had eluded him for years. This was no grand gesture or heroic act, but something far more profound: the simple, quiet power of a heart willing to give, to forgive, and to begin again. The weight of the decision pressed down on Micah like the heavy storm clouds gathering over the distant horizon, dark and unrelenting. Each passing day pulled him deeper into a relentless battle, between what was expected, what was demanded by the world around him, and what his heart quietly longed for. The whispers of judgment and the cold stares of neighbors were relentless, carving invisible scars across his resolve. He felt the sting of isolation in the crowded streets, the silent accusations carried in sidelong glances, and the heavy silence where once there had been warmth. His work grew harder. The long hours seemed to stretch infinitely, each task punctuated by the gnawing doubt that maybe his choice to reconnect with grace and hope was a reckless gamble. The world wasn't kind to those who chose compassion over convenience, and every gesture of kindness seemed to be met with suspicion or scorn. Micah's dreams of rebuilding a fractured family were threatened by the harsh reality of sacrifice, a sacrifice not just of time or comfort, but of his very standing in the community. Late into the night, alone in the dim light of his small living room, Micah wrestled with the voices inside his mind. There was the part that urged him to retreat, to protect himself by closing the door he had just opened, to shield himself from the pain that came with vulnerability. But beneath that was a fiercer, quieter voice that refused to be silenced, a voice that reminded him of promises made long ago, of a love that never truly faded, and of the children whose futures depended on his courage. The pressure built, an invisible storm that battered his spirit, threatening to break the fragile bonds he had begun to forge. Yet in that turmoil there was clarity. The hardest choices were never about ease or comfort. They were about integrity, about standing for what was right even when the world turned away. Micah knew that walking away now would be the easiest path, but it would also be the betrayal of everything he held dear. With a slow, deliberate breath, he made his choice. Not because the path ahead promised peace or approval, but because some things, love, responsibility, redemption, demanded the courage to endure. In that moment, Micah embraced the uncertainty, the hardship, and the loneliness that might come. He chose family over fear, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. As dawn broke and spilled light into his room, the weight lifted just enough for a weary smile to touch his lips. The road ahead was daunting, the sacrifices real, but his heart was resolute. Sometimes the hardest choices became the truest acts of bravery, and for Micah, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every fiber of his being, but also offer the possibility of healing the wounds time could not erase. The air was thick with tension as the fragile peace that had settled over Micah's world began to tremble beneath the weight of secrets long buried. For years, shadows had clung to the edges of his life, unspoken truths that gnawed quietly beneath the surface, threatening to unravel the delicate fabric of trust he was painstakingly weaving with grace and hope. But that evening, in the dim glow of the fading sunset, the walls that guarded those secrets finally gave way. It started with a hesitant confession, a trembling voice breaking through the silence of the small living room. Grace, her eyes shimmering with tears, revealed the truth she had carried alone for so long, a truth that explained the absence, the distance, the aching void that had haunted their family. The words tumbled out in a rush, raw and unfiltered, painting a picture of pain and sacrifice, of mistakes made and forgiveness long sought but never found. As she spoke, Micah felt the years of separation collapse, replaced by a fierce surge of empathy and understanding that washed over him like a cleansing storm. Hope, watching quietly from the corner, clung tightly to her mother's hand. Her small face a mixture of fear and hope, mirroring the uncertainty of what was to come. Micah reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against hers. A silent promise that whatever the past held, they would face the future together, united by the fragile but unbreakable bond of family. The truth, once a chasm dividing them, now became the bridge that might carry them forward. As the night deepened, the atmosphere shifted from tension to transformation. The revelation sparked a series of conversations that flowed like rivers, cleansing old wounds and planting seeds of healing. Micah shared stories from his own past, the regrets and the lessons, the love and the losses that had shaped him. Grace, in turn, spoke of her fears, her resilience, and the dreams she still dared to dream for hope's sake. In this sacred exchange, the barriers between them dissolved, replaced by a shared resolve to rebuild what had been broken. But just as the newfound hope began to take root, an unexpected message arrived. A letter that carried news from the past, from someone who had once held the power to change everything. The letter revealed hidden truths about the circumstances that had driven them apart, truths that neither Micah nor Grace had known. It spoke of misunderstandings, betrayals, and the silent battles fought in shadows, painting a fuller picture of the pain that had torn them apart. The revelation was both shattering and liberating, unraveling the last threads of doubt and forging a clearer path toward reconciliation. In the days that followed, Micah found himself standing at a crossroads, the weight of the letter heavy in his hands but lightened by the strength of the family now within reach. The journey ahead was no longer just about healing old wounds, but about embracing a future forged from truth and courage. The steps were uncertain, the path steep, but for the first time in years, hope blossomed with an unshakable certainty. Micah looked at Grace and Hope, two lives intertwined with his own, imperfect and beautiful, and knew that this moment marked not an end, but a powerful new beginning. The past had been a shadow, but now, bathed in the light of truth, it was a foundation from which they could rise, stronger and more connected than ever before. And in that quiet, profound realization, the final pieces of their fractured story began to come together, a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness, love, and the courage to face whatever truths life revealed.